All right. Hello, everyone. Well, it is now a minute after the hour, so good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are dialing in from. Today, we have an exciting panel. We've got now 59 minutes. We've got a lot to cover. I think this will be a lot of fun today. Really looking forward to our guests, our speakers. So, want to just get right into it. By way of introduction, my name is Dave Hannibal. I'll be your moderator today. I'm CPO. I run Corp Dev here at Squirro. So I will just kind of be navigating the conversation. You probably don't want to hear necessarily as much from me as much as you'll want to hear from these other two gentlemen. So want to just kick things off, set the stage with who these great people are. So Cyrus, over to you maybe for a quick introduction and welcome to everyone here.
Sure. Thank you, David, and thank you for inviting me. I'm Cyrus Daruwala. I'm based out of Singapore. Until only about a week ago, global head for financial services all across IDC's end user practice. And now I head up what I call a government-led initiative, also in research, but it's very ASEAN focused. It's called the ASEAN Economic Forum. Absolutely delighted to join you guys.
Great to have you. And Dorian.
Thank you, David, for the introduction. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening to all of our attendees. Thank you for joining us for this hour. My name is Dorian. I'm one of the co-founders of Squirro and its CEO. Good to have you here. Happy to talk a bit about our experiences in how to scale Gen AI and whether it's worth to buy or build.
Awesome. So as Dorian mentioned, and as the opening slide kind of said, as I welcomed everyone, today is all about discussing the buy versus build topic. We will take a slight bent and talk about this mostly in financial services for no other reason of I think we all are kind of financial services minded. Cyrus and I were talking about when was my last time out in Singapore, and it was to meet with some of the banks out there, and it's been my bent. Dorian, obviously, building now. This is his third startup. And being out of Switzerland, the hub of financial services for a very very long time. We want to kind of keep that there and tell some great stories about that. But hopefully, this is applicable to not just FinServ, but everyone else outside of that. So just in terms of an agenda, really there's call it 4 topics that I really want to address today and kind of have us kind of go over. So without further ado, let's kind of hop right in. If we look at the significance of Gen AI and financial services, maybe just, some high level details, the way I kind of see this to set the stage. And then Cyrus, I'll turn it over to you. Look, the value we see is really off the charts. It is extremely exciting when you get to talk to individuals in large banks, in large asset managers, in insurance, and they get to sit there and quote you things like, we saw a 200% increase in efficiency in our employees, or we saw across our particular very expensive corporate bankers, 96% reduction in time it takes to do some of their most critical tasks. And that is what is different this time around when I say that this is a significance, is because unlike other revolutions we've seen, the fun part about this revolution is it's tied to really amazing stats and figures. And I think that is going to set this apart. That is going to be the difference maker when we talk about Gen AI in a year, 2 years from now. I tossed a couple stats that we're seeing on our end. These are directly from our customers. I think it's always important to be able to tell great stories, but quantify it and not just qualify what's going on. And this is the real testament to Gen AI and financial services, that we can look at amazing large institutions, regulators all across the world, financial services all across the world, and they continue to prove value. Dorian, maybe I'll just ask you, is there any one or two of these stats? Obviously, these are all our customers running in production. Some are more or less financial services versus insurance that you want to call out, that really just, you want to kind of draw people's attention to about the significance of what we're doing in Gen AI.
Yeah, maybe just two. Number one is the middle one, the 99% piece, right? I often frame it like that. Everybody at the moment does experiments, maybe has done the first steps in pilots, POVs, who knows, maybe even a production run with a so-called retrieval augmented generation system, a RAG system. But let's kind of like make that super simple. A RAG system has a search component and has an LLM component that you put together to generate answers within the context of your company. Now, here's the thing. Search is probabilistic and LLM is probabilistic. That is, probability multiplied or a day added with probability does not give you certainty, right? Full stop. Now, for taking that to accuracy levels that you need in an enterprise, our experience has been over the past couple of years, you need reference data, you need effectively a graph RAG element. And then the one number that you see here in the middle is the accuracy number. In the moment you have a pure RAG, depending on the quality of your input data, you might get to quality ranges of, I don't know, maybe north of 50%, 60, 70, 80%. But under normal circumstances, that's not something that's acceptable to any company, because that means 1 out of 5 interactions is wrong. Not something that any quality manager will ever accept. In the moment you inject that graph RAG piece of the equation, you get to 99+%. That is what you need to get it to enterprise level. So that's one of the elements that I think is quite important. Another one is a bit shy, but we can debate whether that's it. And Cyrus would be keen to hear your view. It's in the top. It's at 64% cost per ticket reduction. Why do I pick that one? We maybe come in the make or buy part 2 of our webinar today on that. As a matter of fact, in the moment you are able to shrink wrap a process from a cost and time perspective by anything north of 50+%, you have a game changer in your hands. Not just in terms of I can do the same for less cost, but this opens up an opportunity to rethink business processes. And that is what my view on Gen AI is today. It's way more than chat. It's way more than a simple cost reduction element, if well placed, but it actually opens up an opportunity to rethink some of your business processes quite holistically. And not only transform them in terms of a better cost service equation, but effectively transform these services for a better customer value perspective. And I think those are 2 numbers that I think will drive a lot of that revolution. But Cyrus, you want to chip in?
Yes, absolutely. I'd be delighted to. Again, I mean, I'll leave you just with an example. David mentioned how we are, talking about financial services, but it's as applicable to, United Airlines as it is to Nomura Security or UBS in this case. When UBS merged with Credit Suisse, and we were called there in Dorian's hometown, we were in Geneva. You talked about ticket, and it's so pertinent that you talked about that. 12,000 people in technology and operations teams in the back office scrambling to do integration, and there were thousands of open tickets per person. So then it starts begging the question, what are these 12,000 people doing if there are that many open tickets? And why is it that it's costing so much for a very large bank? So again, that's a use case where if you're saying, if it's taking me that many processes and there's a chink in the chain at every handover of the process, it makes perfect sense for you to go and saying, I can't cope up with that. Let me tilt towards the buy component, see what's available, see what's enterprise grade, see what is secure, as David mentioned, and then go to market. So I'm sure we'll talk about that. But yeah, that's one of the reasons why we were very gung-ho about recommending Squirro to a lot of the clients here in Asia.
And I think that's a great kind of segue into diving in and kind of going from broad, and let's start pulling in this a little bit more narrow, right? And Cyrus, you kind of hit on this, right? That there is a lot of value in Gen AI going, you just mentioned tickets and dealing with tickets. To your point, you could be in telecom, you could be in the airlines, you could be Bonvoy, right, which has hotels everywhere around this world, right? In your neck of the woods down the road from you, as well as me on the other side of this world, we both have the Bonvoy Hotel, right? And guess what? They all have tickets. And I think that is what's so, monumental about Gen AI is that it'll impact everyone, right? And so it's not just, oh, is financial services unique? It really isn't. But, maybe, a question to you, the three elements that seem to be a little bit more unique when it comes to financial services is around data privacy, data security, right? And then the monumental scale of all of this, given it is a kind of regulated space. I sum it up as those three elements. Maybe from your end, what are the three elements that you're seeing? Are they the same ones, different? Maybe it's the same in certain verticals, different in others. What are you seeing?
I would add just one more component. This whole hype around customer centricity. What is that? When you say we are very customer driven, whether it's Netflix saying that I understand you, or whether it's UBS or Standard Chartered or HSBC or BBVA telling you that we are very customer driven, what does that mean? They've narrowed down the art of taking a massive amount of data, analyzing that on the fly, understanding, again, in Dorian's terms, the 99% accuracy, and saying, you know what, David, I understand you better than the rest. That's all it is. The magic of data augmented by a generative AI platform, if I call it that. So the customer centric part is another unique component. But yeah.
Yeah, and Dorian, maybe from your end, are you seeing anything unique? Given Squirro spends a lot of time with the BFSI sector, some other sectors as well, but maybe if you look at the customers outside of BFSI, is there things that are unique that you're seeing?
Oh, the FS space.
Mm-hmm.
I think most of maybe also the listeners here in the webinar, and for the listeners, if you want to interact with us, add your questions to the chat function and the Q&A function. I happily pick them up. Obviously, one thing I see is I think FS has the regulatory aspect to it, right? Way more than other industries. Obviously, every industry today is not kind of like a free for all. If you're in the pharma industry, you're subject to heavy regulation. If you're in the airline industry, same in many industries, but the financial services, because it's an international setup, is certainly subject to a lot of that red tape type situation on a day in, day out base. Number one, and number two, many established players are not kind of like established for 5 years, but are established for 50 years. So they have effectively quite some legacy collected over the years in terms of complexity of IT systems that they need to manage and where information resides. So I have seen many situations where larger corporates, as an example here in Switzerland, have that massive weight of an IT infrastructure that they need to maintain, that drags them down in terms of innovation, that drags them down in terms of speed and value creation for the rest of the business. And I think that is surely something where this new technology wave that now comes in, okay, maybe adds a bit of additional layers of technology, but on the other side also has this propensity of, I often refer to that as WD-40, this type of oil, right, where you have two rusty pieces overlaid of each other, a bit of WD-40, and you get it separated. And so this technology stack that appears here with Gen AI has actually this propensity to help such situations with lots of legacy, lots of regulation, lots of different jurisdictions, etc., to actually streamline these processes. That is surely a bit specific to FS because of what I just laid out, but not only. I think it applies to many businesses today.
Yeah. Yeah, and I fully agree with that. Hence the giant no in the center of the slide that I kind of put, which is I kind of preceded where I thought this would go, which is there's maybe some nuances, but overall, look, it's all the same. So, look, I think this is a great point to now turn the page and kind of dive the next layer deep, right? And so, Cyrus, what I would like to do is kind of turn it over to you. Given what you do day in, day out is all around talking to companies, understanding where they're going, see where these trends are going. Maybe talk us through and spend a couple of minutes talking us through what you're seeing in the market and where you kind of expect that market to kind of go.
Sure. My apologies. It looks a little distorted. The slide and the bars that you see in the slide are supposed to indicate numbers. But the only number you really need to look at is the one on top, 500 plus billion being spent on Gen AI and AI. Why suddenly the hype? And I'd admit I was amongst the first to saying, oh, this is another CRM cloud type hype and it's going to go. But I was wrong. It changed the way we think processes. It changed the way we think ODM, other people's data. Basically what that means is whether you start looking at financial services, and yes, they are unique and they're different. And Dorian mentioned why they are regulated because you're handling other people's money. And by money, they mean you're handling other people's data. You're a custodian of money, which means you're a custodian of data. And behind that lies an unused term, which is called operational technology. So why this big spend in banking, financial services? They have been marred with spend, which is operational spend. What is core banking? If I ask any of you bankers, it's the beating heart of a bank. A UBS spends 800 million euros. On the other side of the world, you have a Commonwealth Bank of Australia spending 1.5 billion Aussie dollars or 1.1 billion US. What are they spending all that money on? It's not the people cost. I'm talking tech cost. That's core banking. And they have started to extrapolate various processes that are mechanical, manual, heavy, and they've started saying, let me build a case study that, again, that graffiti that we saw, various points that David mentioned. One of them was, I can't keep spending more, so I'll change that to something else. I was going after Teradata and spending 300 million on data warehousing and data analytics. And the output, again, as Dorian mentioned, was maybe about 40%, maybe 50%. So in today's day and age, do you want to spend all that much and get a maybe, or do you want to have that accuracy? Then lay on top, you can't just have a SaaS model and saying, well, I don't know. The AI suggested, yes, she can get a loan, yes, he can get a loan, or don't get that. So ethical AI came in. And if you start peeling the onion, everybody started saying, we've been sinking good money after bad money. So why don't we try and take an accord? And I have some graphics to go with, saying, what use cases are we going to define? And that led to this absolute boom. So it's not new spend, it's reconciliation, saying, we've been spending on IBM Watsons. And honestly, I was one of the first to put that into a very large bank here. And my God, was it embarrassing, guys. Fast forward, now we are in 2025. Squirro could do it in 1/4 the price and 1/10 the time. So those are some of the math that people are saying, now we have the tools, now there is no excuse. If you go to the next slide, David, I think I've explained that, where if you click the animation, yeah, there you go. We're calling it widening AI. We'll be the first to admit, of course, with the exception of Dorian, who's lived it, breathed it, and created it, we all started dabbling in AI 4 years ago. And we all started realizing, we can do that too. We should be able to do that too. Oh my God, this solves this problem. Classic example, one of the world's largest insurance companies, AIA, came to us and they were struggling because they were still on a mainframe and they were still doing everything ad hoc. And my first question in that day was, if you're data centric, and that's what insurance is, what architecture, what is the intelligence in your architecture? We don't have one. Okay, let's start looking at your digital operations at scale. If you're saying you're signing up 100 million new clients in an emerging market like South America or in ASEAN, How are you catering to that? How are you being cost effective? You're just throwing money after bad for application. Kind of, that's what we do. And what about
Mhm.
skills? Do you have something? Well, yeah, we've got a couple of kids and we've got a couple of data scientists, and I think we are enough. All three were no, no, and no. Widening AI inevitably will lead to one simple answer: buy it, and then maybe you augment it. So in the next slide, I'm saying um, if all of these people, the ones that you're talking to and others, I mean, I have a couple of trivia questions around AI and Gen AI. I won't bore you with that. But my God, these tech companies are spending billions in R&D, which a bank would not be able to do. So the classical example, you need a glass of water, you're not going to go dig a well. You need a glass of milk, you're not going to go buy a cow. Very simple, very straightforward. You need that operational put. There are people grabbing data and telling you, you want this flat screen TV at 2000 US. Are they talking to Samsung? Are they talking to the shop? Are they talking to the bank, your bank? Are they talking? The consumer doesn't care. It's a data point. I need this $2,000 TV. You tap the card and the TV is yours. That is nothing more than embedded finance with the use of data. Then you start looking at infrastructure. You need that data, but you don't have the stacks, the MIPS, the compute, and the capability to ingest that huge amount of data. And by the way, a bubble burst here. Gen AI is very heavy on your infra and your compute. So if you try to build it, God be with you, because that's not going to work out. You will be chucking a whole lot of storage and dynamic directories and compute power. Yet again, leads to one word: buy. And the AI ready infrastructure. What we are saying is there is this automated, flexible, secure control platform. And I'm not saying it because we are in a Squirro, a webinar. You don't want to start with an experiment. You want to start with something that's been tested and proven. Our competitors, Gartner, have a quadrant, and we have a MarketScape, and Forrester has a wave, and they show up on the top everywhere. Why? There is a reason, because they thought through your processes. And then, of course, then you bring it down towards your workload. And the workload here in the next slide, uh, I'll go through that and pass it back to you, David,
Sure.
where what are workloads and how do you create this ready infra? It's quite simple. When you're looking at cloud, because you want to burst across, and you're United Airlines, one of the world's largest owner of planes, and by volumes, they do more than the next five put together. Now, how do you come up with a cloud infrastructure and move your critical solutions to cloud and embed some intelligence? Well, I suspect, as I've written there, that includes tech buyer. You'll have to go and talk to the people who create it. Or if you're looking at operational efficiency, my example around UBS. And if you're looking at data centers, when we say we are capable, and data centers are important because financial services has this one inhibitor called data sovereignty. Most of the people don't like consumer data, transaction data leaving their countries. So, what are you going to do? If you're present in 53 countries, you're going to build 53 data centers and keep upgrading it. Not possible. And that's the magic of data cache. When you have this build versus buy, you take a digital layer, you understand the business logic, you apply the intelligence behind it. Whilst your data sits within your firewall, the intelligence does not need to. That's what we call a ready infrastructure. That's what we call an AI ready infrastructure.
Yeah.
So I took a while to explain all that, David, but very passionate
No.
about that. So,
Yeah, look, that's super helpful, and I really appreciate the way you kind of anchored those points around AI infrastructure and getting your house ready for getting to the heart of the matter, which is, okay, now do I build or do I buy, the Gen AI platform that's going to carry me forward into this next wave of innovation. The one of the joys for me on the product side is, unlike salespeople, I get asked, similar to Dorian, to speak, right, on these topics, right? And I can give a product view that's totally outside and just, kind of the way I kind of see it. And then, over the fall, I spoke at a bunch of different events, and build versus buy came up numerous times. And, the resounding thing that I really started to hone in on and find is the concept of what makes you unique, right? What makes, in Singapore, HSBC different than if you walked across the street and went to Standard Charter, all right? Or, take that example in whatever geography you may be in, right? Even in talking airlines, what makes Delta different than American, right? I can get on the same plane, right, made by Boeing to the same destination, but why do you choose one versus another? And it's usually not because behind the scenes, one chose to run Postgres and the other one chose to run BigQuery, right? That's usually not the way people kind of think about it. They think about it from the employee experience, from the customer experience perspective. And that's so too about what we are starting to see is the smart companies are realizing that, hey, what makes me unique is how I engage with my customers, about how satisfied my employees are, because more satisfied employees output better, output happier, etc. And therefore focusing on how do I achieve those objectives, right? And that maybe be, let me focus in on my data. What makes me unique as me as a bank different than someone else? Or I'm going to take an AI first approach. And so when we're all used to really terrible mobile experiences, right? I, as a bank, want to come out and have an amazing conversational AI that actually allows me to solve the problem of the customer. Because right now I can go on, and I won't name names, the bank app that I have, I know for a fact that every time I use it, I never get the answer in their chat functionality that I need, right? And you're starting to see this where people are honing in and saying, I'm going to build an SLM. I'm going to focus on the data. I'm going to focus on the conversational AI element. And that is where you want to focus your time and energy, not necessarily on, maybe I'm going to build the platform that hosts the model. I'm going to build the platform that runs the ML ops. I'm going to build those elements, because the ROI to them is not going to make them any different than if you go across the street, right? So maybe, Cyrus, a question to you, you're an industry expert, right? So how are you guiding financial services organizations on where to build versus where to buy? Because when you say Gen AI, it's not just one kind of company,
piece,
right?
Yeah.
One piece. It's
It's not one.
multifaceted.
Yeah, you're right. It's not one piece, and I'm speaking not just as an industry person. I was with HSBC for 12 years, and we built and we built and we built and we built. And look at us, we're not going anywhere. So where did all that money go, and why is it that after spending so much, yeah, we are a monopolistic bank. By we, I mean in Asia, we are number two. Why is it that we built so much? I think it was just that spur of the moment because tools were not available. But I don't think HSBC or Wells Fargo or Citi or JP is going to do that anymore, because now the tools are available. Very simple. We used to
Yeah.
grind stuff at home. Now you can get it off the shelf. That's the example. So, and Gen AI, I'd urge the viewers and the attendees not to be caught in the hype or the FOMO. We're doing something in Gen AI. Well, it's a big piece, as David mentioned. What business case or use case are you trying to solve? And behind each one is a workflow that is Gen AI powered. And it's a different way of going to market. So, yeah, new season just released. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So maybe this is a good transition then into, the new season, what you're seeing, or maybe, if we want to talk about some data centric, platforms and models, either question, take your pick on what you want to kind of go after here.
Yeah. So content management systems is something that I would look at as an easy go-to. If you're struggling with where do I start? Okay, fine. We buy in, guys. You had a great webinar. We all sold. Where do I start? I suspect, again, in a couple of the slides after this, I have use case, define the use case and how you can actually go. And there are some components or some building blocks. Would you know, a trivia question, the most prevalent use of Gen AI and large language models is actually in the legal profession. They rummage through hundreds of thousands of documents in a flash, and then they summarize it and give you that optimum output, that 99% that Dorian talked about. That's content management. The ability to look at David in a 360 format if he's a premium customer with one of your private banks. What does that do? That's actually a content management piece. They look at the various data sets. They look at various attributes of that data set. They help you ETL without ETLing there. They standardize it. They apply some intelligence. You have a graph technology where it helps you show the connectivity of David, his wife, his kids, his holdings, and lo and behold, you have a single view. So again, the use cases are many, and the new release, as you called it, the new season, now people have better defined use cases. People are understanding that more. But maybe I'll pass that to Dorian and see what he has to say from a
Yeah, I was
new
going to say,
season.
Dorian, you've seen the CMS story multiple times. So, maybe, you've got some great stories to tell on that. So maybe if you want to tell some of them, that'd be great.
Yeah, that's why I titled that slide here, New Season, just released. It's rinse and repeat. 25 years ago, a certain Swiss bank got from us, actually it's longer, 95, that's 30 years ago, got from us the first web page. Yeah. We went to the board of that bank, showed them that web page, and you know what they told us? We don't need a web page. Money is trust. People come to our branches. And then, as a matter of fact, Beat Schmid, my doctoral supervisor, Professor Beat Schmid, lovingly referred to as Dr. Beat, had this a bit Steve Jobs-like allure. He was, at the time, really ahead of times, talking about electronic markets, not necessarily internet, not necessarily e-commerce, back in the early 90s. And as a part of that, we had this, in this institute where I did my PhD, we had this little experiment where you had two PCs in the boardroom of this bank, and PCs as in personal computers. And after we got told off for the website piece, we went there and said, there's actually one more thing we'd like to show you. And then the people came with us and we showed them a personal computer to personal computer e-banking transaction. The year was 1995, end of 1995. You know what the answer was? We don't need e-banking. Money is trust. People come to our branches. Fast forward to about 2000, the internet was just made, if I correctly remember, on Newsweek or one of these magazines, that person of the year. Everybody understood that was maybe a false assessment a couple of years prior. Set Bank, you know what they did? They started to build their own content management system. Us, as a digital transformation agency, went to them and said, don't do this, don't do this. We were younger, a bit less gray hair, and they told us, well, we're this experienced multinational banking group, we know how to build. And we said, don't, because multilingual content rendering is a bit more difficult than the sketch you showed us on your paper, which actually it is, because you need to be able to orchestrate content in multiple languages across multiple versions, etc., etc., etc. So it is actually a bit more complex than most people think. Guess what they did? They started to build that stuff themselves. Guess what happened? They failed about 2,000 million Swiss francs later. Nowadays money, maybe about $30 million or so later. You know what they did? They eventually went to the market and bought what today is Adobe Web Experience and have run most of their web activities ever since on that platform. Now, why did they do that buy piece later and not right from start where they went to build? I think they misunderstood the complexities. And because it was a nascent market, it obviously was fun to do that stuff. And They could maybe also kind of like internally position that as innovation, etc. All valuable elements. And by the way, I don't have anything against this learning piece of learning how to build stuff. But again, a bank USP is not multilingual content rendering. A bank USP is to provide good financial services, full stop. And I've seen then the story, and that's why I have here season 2. I had the privilege to be in the front row seat for e-commerce. We built our first e-commerce solutions at the turn of the century, really great stuff, where there were no mobiles, hardly any personal computers, less alone notebooks. And then sort of around the financial crisis, everyone understood I need to reduce my distribution cost, and e-commerce is a good way to do that. And I had the front row seat again, seeing what some companies did. They said, oh, you know, building my own shopping basket, that's easy. Yes, that's easy. But then you suddenly need information, as in product information, including, as an example, digital assets, to, as an example, show that goods that you want to sell online in an online website. Most companies had no product information management systems at the time, less alone the integration into what you need beyond the shopping basket. Payment systems, logistics systems, the whole ERP to know what the stock is, the whole process from ordering all the way to the returns, etc., etc., etc. And guess what? Exact same story. Most people that started to build that stuff themselves eventually had to kind of like raise the white flag, because that orchestration element, that's the piece, the orchestration element was a bit more complex than maybe they thought. And again, if you take here in Europe, the Zalandos of this world, or if you take in the US, the Walmarts of this world, there may be the exceptions. But for the average, as an example, consumer brand, their specialty, their USP is their products, not the orchestration of a complex e-commerce process. And now we're in the same game. What you see to the right, season 3, just released, is the whole Gen AI story. And what I have seen over the past years, and it's a novel technology, what OpenAI did for the world is turn what was before minority sports, machine learning till about 3 years ago was literally minority sports, into a worldwide phenomenon. I just got a couple of pictures sent from a friend of mine that is at the World Economic Forum that happens these days. And they literally plastered a good chunk of Davos wall to wall with AI, 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 right? It's the thing of the day. Now, we're gonna peel the onion a bit in the next couple of slides. As always, just sticking an AI sticker on a house in Davos and actually driving real enterprise value are 2 different things. And it's the same thing again. Such an Gen AI enterprise level box is a bit more complex. And I think you have some findings on that, Cyrus, right?
Yes, we do. That's exactly what we were saying. I mean, introduction of Gen AI to the engineering people, and again, by the sound of it, Dorian, you sound like an engineer at heart, albeit technical or engineering. So, I mean, again, we're not here to preach the benefits, I guess, of Gen AI or what AI can do. We're all cognizant, we're all aware of that. But I again keep urging all of that you do needs to be defined. You see, I mean, it's like for most of us who are parents, you know, giving your teenage kid a Bugatti Chiron, not a wise move. Extremely powerful, it's extremely fast, it's extremely beautiful to look at, but they don't know how to use it, and then they'll end up blaming that car. So Gen AI is nothing more than ability to do a massive amount of compute, learn, as Dorian mentioned, continuously learn from ingestion of data, whether it's written, multi-language, different what you call structured or unstructured data, and that's what banks have, whether it's voice, whether it's contracts, whether it's, and in the insurance industry. And then you come up, and somewhere in the middle is the happy ground of this is where I can actually apply the constraints, understand the use case, come to my resources, realize that we don't have the right experts, and then create the value, come up with a model. And that's what Squirro does, or that's what people do. They come up with the right model, and the model and the data that you have in the next one. There you go. So you keep asking, David, build or buy. So let's look at a typical stream or a breakdown. And that's what we've been doing for 20 odd years with about 300 institutions across the world. These are your working groups, and you know that. Do you have the infra? Probably, of course. Data centers, security. These are all various divisions within the bank, and you can kind of relate to that. And Dorian mentioned a very beautiful and prevalent word, the orchestration. We call it the experience orchestration. Do you have the capability to understand, how Anu or David or Dorian look at their mobiles? That is the data set. How is it that I swiped? The pressure with which I swiped, that's a data set. Apple is smart enough to know that data set. Do you have the capacity to reach his or her mobile, pull out that data set, the semantics behind it, put it into an engine, analyze that and saying, you've been pressing pretty hard. Are you angry? Now that's an experience orchestration layer. And then, of course, the transformation services, which will be right at the bottom, because you don't transform for the sake of it. You have to have a use case. And the last slide that I have is how you're going to create what we call the working groups. And the working group part is the simple part. Don't come up with, I've got an idea, I'll go and buy because my CEO says that this is available. Yes, it's been available for a couple of years, and you may end up doing a boo-boo if you just go and buy and don't optimally use it. Work with someone to define the case. We are a corporate bank, say UBS again. We want to be connected, and we want our treasuries to be able to understand all the receivables and payables of a Walmart, so that they don't have to put an army of people and the tickets, which is in finance. We will manage it in an automated manner. That's a working group. You're working on corporate banking, you're working on global transaction banking, you're working on cash management. These are very heavy lifting data sets that you redeem yourself from. So come up with that, come up with the steering committee, and then you will start seeing the benefit. And cost, my friends, is an extremely big benefit. It's a precipitate. It's not something that you get. Here's cost benefit. It's a precipitate. You shave off various processes that are broken. You shave off mundane task people, the 12, 13, 15,000 people. You automate even your development and your testing capabilities using AI. You come up with a data platform that's dynamic enough. You come up with a use case per business division, if so be. Then the functional use cases become so much more receivable and 1/4 the cost. That's what I say. So that's my take on the build versus buy. It's a resounding, don't be ridiculous, buy it. But over to you guys.
Yeah, Dorian, maybe, if you want to add on to this, or, I know you spend a lot of time on build versus buy and kind of done some deep dive, just item by item. How would you like to kind of describe this build versus buy approach?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for what you laid out. And Cyrus, right? I think it's fair to admit we are a Gen AI enterprise platform provider. So obviously we have an interest to say it's better to buy. Let's make it plain and simple. One can, if the audience listens to us, immediately say, these guys simply try to talk to their own interest. I try to take a step back, and if you maybe add and go to that next slide, David, I put down here just a couple of elements, that differentiate buy from build, right? And we are already coming to the other end of the hour and want to have time for a couple of questions, so I keep that short. And anyway, we're going to send all these slides to the audience, right? Take just the second line, innovation, right? Now, everybody can do innovation. everybody can obviously innovate within a company. But go back to that example, you talked about banks, I did, we talked about e-commerce, right? What is the USP of a bank? Is it core innovation in computer science and associated territories, like as an example, applied Gen AI? Or is it how to run an efficient, customer-focused, as an example, consumer lending business or institutional banking group or whatever it is within the FS space? I think it's the latter. So by definition, in terms of innovation, most larger mid-sized organizations, and the small anyway not, will always be, if I may say, have-beens in the innovation space compared to the purebreds, right? Or taken second step. We should go back to the other one. Just
Sorry.
one more moment. That's okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Take a second step. As an example, application support and availability, right? Let's suppose you get around the hurdle of building that stuff, and I trust most organizations have wonderful people to be able to do that. In the moment you build this new innovative things, the boring stuff starts. You need to run that over time, because the return on investment of any such new application does not come on day one. It comes at the earliest on day 181 or plus. And that's normally considered relatively boring, because in a Gen AI situation, you need, as an example, run day in, day out, large vectorized indices. This is not the innovation stuff that the innovation people say in such an innovation group long for doing. They already moved on to the next chapter. And then suddenly the run the bank people need to run something that they're not used to. Large vectorized permission enabled indices. Good luck with that. So what we try to do here as a next, and I hope the audience can use that, is a small, if you go to the next slide, David, is a small, simple sort of sketch how to decide whether it's
workflow
versus build, kind of like a workflow, right? Let's start with the top left one. Is this strategic? Gen AI? Probably most people will say yes. Some people will say no. And if you say no, go straight to buy. If it's not just strategic, you anyway do not want to invest core corporate resources, go and buy. But if it's strategic, yeah, think hard about what to do, right? And now you can run through that. Are we the best to build? If no, go buy. If yes, sure. Even though I have a couple of question marks, you come to that. And then you can now run through that, right? Do we have the current know-how? Can we support it long term? Can we actually build this in a cost-efficient manner? And by the way, mostly overlooked, but very important in larger organizations, is there no crowding out? Because normally the very same people that are now tasked with building, as an example, this exciting new Gen AI stuff, would you remove the Gen AI stuff off the equation? Would, as an example, help to, as an example, take the core business applications to the next level. Now, the day has 24 hours and you can only do two things. So sleep and work, maybe some eat. Anyway, from a work perspective, got to pick one. And then you end up in the build, in the buy section. Because I have seen hardly any company that has no element about crowding out in the moment they allocate resources. And here comes the tough piece. Let's suppose you answered all of this, yes, 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 and then you build. Here's the thing. Let's suppose your people are really good, and I'm sure, yeah, they're good. You selected them well. I have seen that in that case of content management systems. I've seen it with e-commerce. If those people are really good, eventually they want to do more than just run your e-commerce shop for your own company, or just run the CMS for your company, or just run the Gen AI piece for your company. They want to apply that know-how elsewhere. Or with other words, they get hired away. And in the moment they get hired away, you know what you're left with? A pile of unloved code. That's the moment the CIO normally needs to go and ask for more budget. Because it'll be tough to kind of like get somebody else to work on that code unless you pay expensive, or the other option is then you go and buy. Now, if we take that to the next level, right, and maybe we, given the time, go on, I think there are a couple of things that one needs to think through. in terms of the adoption. Because what I've seen over the past 2 years, if you go to the next slide, is a lot of experimentation. And by the way, that's good, because you need to understand what this Gen AI stuff does, what this WD-40 does on your organization. And without your own experience, you'll not be able to appreciate what is. But to pick up on a report that McKinsey most recently released, the link is here in the set, and we're going to send it to you as well. McKinsey strongly recommends to CIOs to do fewer things, but do them better. That is, rein in on that plethora of AI initiatives, select for value, select for simplicity, and select for reuse or lose. Better say reuse. And what they also propose in that paper is a sort of a reference architecture, how to set such a thing up. And that reference architecture has a few components. Time is now too short to go through all of them, but it obviously contains data prep, guardrailing, it contains the element how you interact with an LLM. It contains all the integration, also the front-end elements, the user interaction elements. Now, here's the thing. A bit like with content management systems and with e-commerce, such a stack is complex, number one, and you need to orchestrate it. The business outcome you desire, as an example, what we discussed at the very beginning, that a cost cut in terms of service operation, or that accuracy increase in terms of answer quality, that requires a complex orchestration of every of these elements. There is no shortcut to that. A bit like with e-commerce, there's no shortcut, and my shopping basket is not enough. An SQL database to store some web pages is not enough. And here it's the same thing. A vectorized database with a bit of LLM is not enough. You need the whole stack. And now what we did, we put effectively that reference architecture and overlaid that with our own architecture. And I'm pretty proud on the product team. Thank you, David. Thank you, product team. That pretty much overlays. We've done that for now 2 years before McKinsey came up with that report. So we can confidently say we've been there before they proposed this reference architecture. And I would agree that orchestration of that stack is tough. Now, as we come to nearly the end, I would want to, and then also pick your brain again, Cyrus, talk about what's the better way forward. Because I do truly believe it's not just buy versus build. It's not an antagonism. It's rather a bit of both sides. And what I tried to sketch here is such a Gen AI solution at the simplistic level contains a foundational model, what you see to the right, contains that tooling layer that we just briefly touched upon, and then contains those applications. And what I often say to customers, to prospects, when I go and speak on industry panels is, this is not a buy versus build. This is a both elements of it. Why? Because while folks like us know how to orchestrate the core stack, you as a company, you know your business 1,000 times better than we ever will know it. So what about if effectively, say, the corporate innovation, you as a customer, help build the generative AI specific business and use case, while you make use of the core components of a platform? That ensures two things. Number one, it ensures higher return on investments because it's more focused on what your company needs and drives on. And B, it ensures longevity. But maybe, 2 moments, what do you think about that, Cyrus?
Sure. Before the time runs out, hello to Sven from the Geneva Trade Convention, as well as Kush, who's dialing in from Zurich. They're all listening in. So they're like, really? So don't text me here, text on the chat there, and we'll be able to answer it. And again, this is where we come in. What we do predominantly is help understand Where is it that you're trying to solve? So when we get an RFI or an RFP, we need to do this. There is some forensics in there. Can a Gen AI tool or a set of tool sets, one that Dorian mentioned, could that possibly solve your problem? Sometimes the use case is just a call center, and there is a certain defined workflow and a tool set for that. If you're looking at the foundational layer as it's written here, again, what is it that you're trying to do? An entire workflow that has identification of documents, ETL, standardize, scrub, learn, and ingest. That's a slightly bigger architectural flow. But then there are, again, what David mentioned through the phone, we are all using chatbots. So these are all pure play case studies and advantages that you have right now. That's not competitive. That's actually pure plumbing. It's essential. It's needed. The business case study, how you define that and how you go to market quicker and how you're able to constantly scale. Dorian mentioned about this whole, we will do it ourselves. Great. Not even about leaving, but how do these people scale? So whilst, who was that? I believe Microsoft just exceeded, they're doing close to about $100 billion worth of AI research. How are you going to compete with that? You don't have 100 billion, you don't have 100,000 people. So you have to buy these tool sets that are available right now so that you can define that case study, you can define that application layer that you're trying to solve a differentiator at the front end, and then go to market. So I think it's a no-brainer, if you ask me, really. There you go. It's clearly written. And by the way, we haven't even rehearsed these slides, right? I mean, it is just a perfect flow. Exactly what I was.
That's why I changed to it. You literally, without you even knowing, we're working on a slide that you didn't prepare, and kind of articulating it. So I figured I'd toss it up there. So round out all of your thoughts for you.
Use cases. So we're aligned there. But yeah, I mean, in the interest of time, I'll pass it to you guys. And look, this is the tip of the iceberg. We can talk more, define better, and then go to market collectively. So yeah, over to you guys, David.
Cyrus, we keep it short. For the whole audience, this slide and the previous slide, we're going to hand that out to you. These are just possible points for you to check. If you go to the previous slides, these are more generic elements. What you should check if you work with a vendor, and on the slide we were just on, these are very specific enterprise Gen AI level questions that either a vendor has an answer to, or you'd better pass the opportunity to work with that vendor. I think we come to the close. I hand over to you, David. Maybe we have time for one or two quick questions.
Yeah, look, I think the main thing I see, is really there's a lot to learn. Right? People need to think about this from where is the biggest ROI, or as you'd say, the biggest bang for your buck when it comes to building versus buying, and what makes you unique, right? Being able to handle all of these points on this slide. Is this what truly sets your organization apart? Or is it your use cases? Is it your people? Is it your customers? And I think and maybe I oversimplify it sometimes as a product guy, sometimes we're known to do that, but, that to me is the core, right? Business exists to serve their customers and better serve their employees and turn in a profit in doing that for their given space. And so buying or building the right elements is the way to think about it, right? And as we discussed, Cyrus, I appreciate your thoughts on where to buy and where to build, and Dorian for your deep dive specifically. I love the McKinsey article when we can reference not just Cyrus as an analyst, but others as well at the same time. So maybe, Cyrus, I'll turn it over to you with the last 30 seconds, a parting word for the audience on this topic.
It's not rocket science when it comes to buying it, because all you do is define what is it that you're trying to fix, the cost escalation, limitation in operations, customer experience. All of these are use cases that are waiting to be defined. And then work with them. And I'm not saying just Squirro, there's a whole ecosystem of Gen AI partners. They can't do without the other. define that, then that becomes a little bit more future proof. And in the next 3 years, it's going to be a whole new tech, and it's going to be quantum computing, and it's going to be different things. So it's not hype that you're buying, it's tool sets. Use them and then look for the new tool sets when they come up in the next 3 to 5 years. Over to you.
And Dorian, anything on your end? I know we're a minute over, but hey, I'm the moderator. I can give us an extra minute, so I can do that. So
I think if I go back to that rinse and repeat element of having in scene now in front row seats twice, I'm very curious to see whether that hypothesis that in 25 you're going to see way more of that standardization. I think there was also one of the questions around that, more appearing and effectively kind of like a wheat from the chaff separation. I think we're going to see in 25 the end of experimentation, and we're going to see in 25 and 26 onwards way more on actual use cases that bring value beyond the pilot implementation. And yeah, sure, dear audience, if you want to hear how we do that at scale, permission-enabled, secure for organizations and companies like Wadala or the European Central Bank and others, drop us a note, drop us a mail. Happy to talk. Thank you.
great. Well, look, I thank you very much. Really appreciate the time from both of you today. And as we've now covered all sides of the globe, Cyrus in Singapore, Dorian over in Switzerland, and myself, East Coast US, hopefully we got a good global audience as well. So thank you for our audience around the world for joining us today, and have a great day, great afternoon, great evening to you all. Thanks. Bye-bye.